While Thor and Loki were traveling far from Asgard in Thor's goat-drawn chariot, night overtook them, and they were welcomed into the house of a farmer and his family. To repay his hosts for their hospitality, Thor offered his goats for supper, knowing that he could bring them back to life afterwards and not be at any loss. After the meal, Thor laid the goats' hides on the floor and instructed his hosts to place the bones on the hides after the meat had been gleaned from them. The farmer had 2 children, a boy named Thjalfi and a daughter named Roskva. Despite the Thunder God's instructions, Thjalfi broke open one of the goat's leg bones to suck out the marrow before placing it on the hide with the others. When Thor woke the following morning, he hollowed the goat's hides and bones with his hammer, whereupon the goats sprang back to life. One of them, however, had a lame hind leg. Thor immediately intuited the reason for this, and was so furious at the farmer and his family that he would have slain them all on the spot had the farmer not offered them his children, Thjalfi and Roskva, to be his servants. Thor accepted, and he, Loki, and the children pressed onward on foot, leaving the handicapped goats behind. The party's goal was to reach Jotunheim, the land of the giants. They crossed an ocean and a thick, tangled forest. Just as night was falling, they came to a huge hall. They found no one inside, and decided to spend the night there. They were jostled awake by a great earthquake. Running outside, they found a sleeping giant whose snores caused the earth to rumble and shake. Thor, who hated giants, clutched his hammer and resolved to smite this short foe of his. But the giant awoke at the last second and seemed to be cheered, or at least amused, by the sight of Thor and his companions. The giant introduced himself as Skrymir, Old Norse for boaster, but said that he already knew full well whom he was introducing himself to. Skrymir picked up his glove, the great hall, in which Thor and his company had slept during the night, and proposed that he accompany them on their journey. To this the god agreed, and off they went through the forests and over hills. At night they took shelter beneath a venerable oak. Skrymir had been carrying all of their provisions in his bag, and when the giant fell asleep, the task of opening the bag fell to Thor, and the god found himself unable to untie the giant's knots. This so angered Thor that he struck the dozing Skrymir in the forehead, hoping to kill him. The giant awoke calmly and asked if a leaf had fallen on his head. Later in the night, the giant's snores grew so loud they echoed through the valleys like thunder. Thor, annoyed by his inability to sleep and wanting to kill the giant anyway, tried a second time to smite him by striking him in the head. But much as before, Skrymir awakened and asked if an acorn had fallen on his head. Just before dawn, Thor decided to try one more time to end Skrymir's life. But the giant awakened, asked if some birds had roosted above him and shaken some dirt from the branches onto his face. Skrymir departed from Thor and his companions, and the company pressed onward toward a castle called Utgard. Around midday, the travelers reached their destination. The gate was locked and no one was there to open it. Thor and the others found that they could fit through the very large spaces between the bars of the gate easily enough. Once inside, they found a hall where men sat eating and drinking. Amongst them was the king of this castle, the giant Utgard the Loki, Old Norse for Loki of the Utgard, who immediately recognized his new guests and set about taunting them for their diminutive size. Wanting to salvage his dignity and that of his companions, Loki proudly asserted that no one else in this castle could eat food faster than he could. Utgard the Loki challenged him to prove this boast by entering a contest with one of the men there, whose name was Loki. A trough of meat was set before them, with Loki at one end and Loki at the other, and they were to see who could reach the middle first. They met in the middle at the same time, but while Loki had eaten all of the meat, between the end and the middle, Loki had eaten the meat, the bones, even the trough itself. Loki had clearly lost. Thialfi, who was an extremely swift runner, then offered to race anyone in the castle. Utgard Loki led him out to a racetrack, wherein he appointed one Hugi to compete with him. By the time Hugi reached the finish line, he was so far ahead of Thialfi that he doubled back to meet his contestant. They raced a second time, and once again Hugi beat Thialfi by a long bow shot. Still, they raced a third time. Thialfi fared even worse. He was still at the middle point of the track by the time Hugi had finished. Thor then challenged anyone in the castle to a drinking contest, something at which he had no little skill. Utgard Loki had one of his servants fetch the kind of drinking horn from which Utgard Loki's men were said to drink. When it was placed before Thor, Utgard Loki informed him that whoever could finish the horn in one drink was considered a great drinker. Whoever could do it in two was considered fair. But no one in his retinue was such a poor drinker as to be unable to finish it within 3. Thor drank mightily, but by the time he had paused for a breath, the level of liquor in the horn had barely lowered. So he gave it a second try, straining to gulp, until his breath failed him. This time the level had gone down appreciably, but the better part of the horn still remained. His third drink was even more formidable than the previous 2, but in the end much was still left. By that point, however, Thor could drink no more and gave up. Then, Utgard Loki suggested that Thor attempt to simply lift his cat from the floor. But despite his struggles, Thor proved unable to do even this. In a rage, Thor challenged anyone in the castle to wrestle with him. Insultingly, Utgard Loki appointed an old woman, Eli, who was one of his servants. But the great god lost even this contest. After this, Utgard Loki decided that there should be no more contests, and the company spent the night there in the castle. In the morning, they rose and prepared to leave. After Utgard Loki had shown them out of the castle, he confided to them what had actually transpired in their contests, saying to Thor, "Now that you have left my castle, I shall see to it that you never enter it again. The knot on my provision bag that you almost succeeded in untying had been wrought in iron. I deflected the blows you attempted to inflict on me with your hammer. Instead of my face, you hit the mountainside and carved 3 gaping valleys into it. Had you struck me, I would have been killed then and there. For you see, I was Skrimir." Loki held his own remarkably well in his eating contest, since his opponent was none other than fire itself. So it was with Thialfi, too. He raced well against thought, which nobody could ever hope to outrun. The far end of the horn from which you drank was connected to the sea, and we were actually greatly afraid that you were going to drink it all. When you cross over the sea again, you will see how much you have lowered its level. My cat was actually the Midgard serpent, whom you succeeded in raising out of the ocean and into the sky. And finally, you wrestled against old age, and it took a long, long time to fall. Now for your sake and ours, leave, and never come back." Thor was so angered by this humiliating trickery that he raised his hammer and prepared to slay Utgard Loki and smash his castle to pieces. But when he turned to do so, he saw no giant and no castle, just a vast, empty plain.
Thank you, my friends, for joining me for our story today. Your time is very precious to me. If you enjoyed our story, please like the video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications, and share our little get-togethers with your friends. All of these things are incredibly helpful to get our stories out to more friends. I had such a wonderful time with you all today, and I hope you'll join me again tomorrow, where I will read a new tale and invite you once again to stay a while and listen.